Welcome along everyone to another on-road podcast video. Today I am going to be talking to you about preparing for a race weekend. And I thought speaking with Jason Williams, another keen RC guy, I thought a really useful tool would be to have some cheat sheets of how you can just mark off those key points and components on various topics of RC. And today I'm going to talk to you about preparing for a race weekend. So let's get in and talk you through those all important components that you want to look at when you're getting ready for your race weekend. So first up, obviously we want to strip the car, and I think there's a few key areas that you want to focus on when you're stripping the car down. First one being that you want to make sure the chassis is straight. Now this may be a silly thing, but once you've taken all your electrics out and stripped it all down to its bare bones, and you've got the chassis on the worktop, you want to make sure that that puppy's nice and flat for you. A couple of ways to check that: you can use the straight edge off a steel ruler. Put it on a glass worktop. Don't let the wife see you, and just give it a tap in each corner. Maybe putting your finger in the middle and just tapping each corner. So that's a good place to start. Then next up, we just want to make sure that the pod is nicely, the chassis is nicely balanced. We want to get those electrics all nicely balanced, and you can check out one of my videos about balancing up your chassis in the YouTube channel. You want to make sure all those bearings are stripped out, get some brake cleaner in there, put some nice quality bearing oil that you can get from your local RC shop. That's really key to making those wheels and axles spin nice and freely. Then we want to move on to making sure that we replace any compressed springs. A lot of people might suggest that you use shims to make them all level, but for me, I think a nice fresh set of springs and making sure that you compress them before you install them is a good way of reducing the ability for them compressing when you have a bit of an accident. So they're the key components that you want to look at when you're looking at the car and stripping it down. Obviously all the other bits and bobs that you probably already know, but those are real key components. Then thinking about your tyres that you want to get ready for the race weekend. I think you need to find out how many runs you're going to have per day. I don't really believe that you want to be running a set of tyres more than once. So work out how many races you're going to be having that day. You might have one practice, 4 qualifiers and a final, so 5 or 6 runs. In certain conditions, you might find it more prudent to use one of those sets twice on the second run. Sometimes it can be a little bit quicker, but that's not often the case if you're at a big meet. Then we move on to just understanding that you want to, as I said, you want to only use one set a day. We're going to go on to the Lipos. Did a video on this a little while ago. Check that out if you haven't done so already. But you want to make sure that you cycle those Lipos before you get to your race meeting. Cycling them just wakes them up. Do them 1, 2, 3 days beforehand if you can. And don't leave them in your car boot before you're about to go the next day. Don't want to get them really cold before you charge them the next day. Lipos like to be at sort of an ambient temperature when they're stored, so don't leave them in that car boot that we've all done at one stage or other. Then moving on to your body shells, want to get those prepared. I always like to go with 1 fresh body shell per day. You know what it's like. You can get out there, excuse me, you can get out there, have a nasty accident in the first bend or two. You've split a body shell, and if you've only bought 1, that makes for a long weekend of repairing body shells. So if it's a couple of days, I'll always have a couple of spare, a couple of fresh body shells in there. If certainly not too fresh, I'll have 1 fresh and 1 backup. But don't forget, you're going to be able to use these at your club meets anyway. If it's a big race meeting, I think it's always good to be prepared with a couple of clean, fresh body shells. Then we move on to the motor. One of the important parts of the car, obviously, want to get that nice and clean. Make sure that you clean that out with a brush. Get the sensor board out. Get the rotor out. Just clean off all that old tyre dust. Maybe even desolder any solder that's been on there building up over a period of time. You have a nice desolder applicator, so you can find that on eBay, on any Amazon website, just to take off any excess solder and resolder those joints, just to make sure you've got a nice clean connection there, just to get the most out of that motor. So strip and clean it before that race weekend. Then we're going to move on to the spares that you want to carry, and I think this is quite an important part. Depending on the size of the meeting, I'd always have a spare chassis kicking around. Not so much maybe at a national event, but if I'm travelling abroad somewhere, I'd certainly have a spare chassis on me. Pod plate, that's definitely something that I'd always carry. Not so much these days. They're starting to become a lot more robust, as we've discussed on many videos before, but a pod plate is a really good thing to have in your kit bag. Kingpins, an absolute must. You are going to bend some of these. You are going to have a nasty whack. Hub axles, hubs as well. They're another one that can break, and just the axle in there. But kingpins are the bare minimum that you want to be carrying. Then move on to some bearings. There is always a nasty sweeper out there that you might turn in a bit early, then whack the outside of the race track and push that axle straight through a bearing that we've all done, and it comes off in a nasty mess with those bearings all scrunchy. So make sure you've got some spare bearings on board. That's always really important. Front cross beam, these things can seem to snap. There's been a few cars that have had issues with this, but they seem to have got their act up and sorted those problems. But I think it's always good to have a good front, lower beam, top beam, camber straps, all that kind of stuff. I think it's important to have those on board. Which then brings us on to the springs. You're always going to have a range of springs, but again, I think it's always important to carry some spares just in case they do compress. As I say, you can shim them just to get around those obstacles, but I'm not a massive fan of that. I like to have a nice fresh set of springs on there if one goes. And there's one big on-road podcast top tip. Do not forget to pack your kitchen roll. That is one thing that when you turn up, you do not want to be spending the weekend pouncing off of other people kitchen roll like I do. Andy Thompson, Nige, they're my favourite fellas that I nick their kitchen roll all weekend. But not this season coming, Nige. Not this season, Andy. I will be the supplier of kitchen roll. Hopefully that's given you some insight and a bit of a quick cheat sheet to prepare for the race weekend ahead. We want to start to get this sort of stuff back into our minds because it's coming, girls and boys. We're going to be racing soon, all being well. And I think these little cheat sheets might be a good way just to remind yourself of what you want to be doing before that all-important race weekend. If you've liked it, make sure you click the like button, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel. There are more cheat sheets coming your way. I said it properly. All the cheat sheets coming your way. And I hope you're all keeping well. And stay tuned for more videos because they're coming your way. All the best.